in three, two.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis King, for joining us on the Black
Yeah.
Album Mixtape. I met you when I was 17 years old.
Oh, Lord, I'm missing that dates me.
Oh, I can't believe that you never changed. Over all these years, you still look the same. Each and
But
every
hey,
time.
you have to stay useful to stay with youth these days, right? It's a challenge.
You are the founder of the Black Academy of Arts and Letters,
Yes.
are a staple of Dallas, Texas, and you are a great advocate for the community. I'd like to know, how did you start with your advocacy? Where does that come from in terms of your background?
Well, really from my mother, quite frankly. My mother, my father, grandparents. I mean, I'm originally from Mississippi,
Yes.
a little small town called Coldwater, Mississippi, which is in the South. And it's a place I know people have never heard of before. But from there, my mother was a school teacher. She taught in public education in Mississippi for 41 years. And my father was a farmer, but he worked in Memphis, Tennessee, near Beale Street. And he was a part of the sanitation strike and the movement. And so they were always involved in a lot of civil rights kinds of projects, things like that. My grandparents were farmers. They owned their own land. And so growing up in that kind of environment taught me a lot of good ethics in terms of working. My grandfather used to always say, when you have your hands out, you have your hands out because you're asking people to pay me for what I've earned. And when you pay me for what I've earned, I'm not begging you for anything. So that was kind of a situation that we grew up in. Then having to graduate from Tate County, at that time, colored high school in Mississippi, went to undergraduate school at Jackson State, and it got picked up. So that's where I met the great Margaret Walker, because the author of Jubilee.
Yes.
And then Dr. Tomington, the student, is a fabulous actress at Jackson State, and some of my other professors there. And so I had the training and the background to work hard. And so my parents were sending me and my other siblings to school, and they were paying for out of their pocket. So I knew not to mess up. So
and you chose the arts.
I chose the arts, theater. It was called speech communication and drama at Jackson State, and that's what I got a degree in. My undergraduate degree is in communication and theater. But then, of course, I had a fellowship that was offered to me at full college universities, but I took TCU, and that's how I ended up in Texas, at Texas Christian University, in the theater department, the master's program. So all along the way, from growing up in the Deep South, going to Jackson State, taking all that with me, and then ended up in Texas at TCU. And after I got out of grad school, I worked with a small community theater in Fort Worth as the artistic director, which was the Sojourner Truth Community Theater, which is not even around anymore. And Jubilee is actually a part of Sojourner Truth, because a lot of the directors and the actors who came out of that theater, Jubilee Theater, came out with the Sojourner Truth Theater. Right. So, I mean, advocacy has always been a part of my life, my struggle, my to do, to accomplish, to achieve. It's just been a part of who I am. Right. And I think the thing that bothers me, sometimes concerns me the most, is when people tell me that you can't do this. If you tell me that you can't do it, then that really is the kind of engine that drives me to do it anyway. Right. So like the Black Academy, I started the Black Academy on my dining room table with $250.
$250 you started it with.
Yeah. Out of my own money.
I remember entering as you were beginning, 17 years old, Junior Black Academy of Arts and Letters, and we would do readings around town. You had a company, and we would do readings around town. And I remember taking a trip to Mississippi on a bus.
Yeah.
Forbes, you remember that?
Absolutely. Well, actually, you were at SMU at the time. And
freshman.
Brilliant actress. You've not changed either. And I have followed your career. I remember when I met you, you came to the rehearsal. It was at the Martin Luther King Junior Recreation Center.
Yes.
Doing Martha Mitchell's Tale Pharaoh.
Yes.
Because it was the Third World Players. And we did it, the first place we did it was at Bonanza Steakhouse.
That's right. Yes. Banana Steakhouse. Yes. That's
right.
where it formed. Yes.
That's right. And Martha Mitchell came to that show because he was an original fellow at Arts and Letters. And Bubbly Brown Sugar had either closed on Broadway or it had been on at close 2 or 3 years before he came. But I had met him in Mississippi with Margaret Walker when he came to do a project on the Institute on the Life, History, and Culture of Black people that she had put together. So I stayed in communication with him. But you were part of the reading that we did called Tale Pharaoh.
Tale Pharaoh, yes.
Remember, we went to Washington, D.C., we went to New York, and when we were in Washington, D.C., we made a visit to Sterling Brown's house. I'm not sure if you remember that. We went to Sterling Brown's house when we did the stop in Washington, D.C., and we also stopped off to do like a little mini performance with the D.C. Black Rep, which really was a part of that kind of grew out of the Negro Ensemble Company, because Robert Hooks and the late Douglas Turner Ward.
Douglas Turner Ward.
Both of them were founders, co-founders of the Negro Ensemble Company.
Yes.
But the deal then was that Doug was going to stay in New York and Robert was going to go to DC. And you're going to have this both companies that would be a part of the Negro Ensemble Company. So Robert Hooks went to DC and started the DC Black Rep. And so we did a reading as a DC Black Rep with some of their repertoire members and the company that we had at the time. It was fascinating. It's amazing at how time is
and traveling the country, connecting these African American companies,
yes,
many of which have not survived.
Absolutely.
It was at a certain point, people were giving money
yes.
Through grants, through individuals' foundations, and then that dried up at a certain point. I believe it really took its turn when white institutions started opening its doors to people of color, and they started getting the money that had been earmarked for these companies of color.
Well, it's interesting how things are so repetitive, if you will.
Yes. Here we are.
Yes. Yeah, here we are again, back in the 1960s. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but Ford Foundation had given money to NEC. They gave money to Free Southern Theater, the Inner City Cultural Center. These were three very prominent and dominant institutions in America. On the East Coast, again, you had the Negro Ensemble Company, but you had other companies like Urban Arts Corporation with Vanna Carroll, and then Free Southern Theater with John O'Neill in New Orleans. You had Gilbert Moses, Denise Nichols all came out of the theater. And then on the far west, you had City Culture Center. And that's why I studied under Bill Riches and lived with her and classes under her called the Theater of Being. But all of the white producers and directors, when they were looking for great Black talent, they would go to our theaters or our Black institutions and get that talent. So on the far west, you had Inner City Culture Center on any day. You had directors, white directors, producers would go to Inner City Culture Center, and then they would cast for television shows and movies out of those theaters. On the East Coast, you had Negro Ensemble Company. I remember the stories, a fascinating story that Esther Rowe told me, again, who was my mentor. She was doing Melvin Van Peebles play on Broadway, and they were looking for a quote maid to play on the Maud show. That's what B. Arthur.
Yes.
So they had actually cast Clarice Taylor in the role.
Mhm.
So Esther was doing Van People's production. I can't remember the title on Broadway, but the casting director saw her doing the role, whatever the role was on Broadway. So she called Norman Lear and said, "Oh my God, I know we've already cast somebody to do the Maud show, but I have found our Florida." Said, "But no, no, we've already got somebody else." Said, "But just please take a look at this lady. This lady is amazing." So he said, "Okay." He said, "Then send me a screen test. Do a screen test with it and send it to me." So the casting director went to see the show the next night, and she waited at the backstage door to see Esther Rose. So she talked to her and told her all about they were doing this pilot called Maud Show, and that they were interested in doing a screen test. So Esther Rose said, "Well, I didn't even know what a screen test was." So she said she met somewhere there in Times Square, and she did the screen test, and they sent the screen test to Norman Lear, and he said, "This is our Maud." But Esther and Clarice Taylor were good friends. And so she was really apprehensive about not taking the role. But what they did is they paid Clarice Tinsley for Clarice Tinsley actually sold a house, but they bought a house back and they paid her everything for that time period that she would have done that show. And Esther Rowe actually went to California and did the Maud show. That's how she ended up in California. But again, they found her in a theater,
Right.
from a Black theater, and she ended up in California. And that's the fascinating thing about the importance of Black institutions in this country.
Well, yes, there is a whole history and legacy of African American theater and its necessity
Yes.
as there was segregation. Where do we go if we're not allowed to go to certain institutions for our entertainment, for our enlightenment, for our education in terms of theater? There's a whole history of that, and our brightest and our best being housed, being nurtured in these race specific institutions. Today, there is a questioning as to what is the significance, what is the necessity of race specific institutions right now? How would you answer that?
I can't even fathom in my mind not having an institution like the Black Academy of Arts and Letters in this country. So not having a Black institution like the Black Academy is like saying not having jazz in America, or not having gospel in America, or not having a Raisin in the Sun in America. All of the work and things that we've done in terms of theater is really a very significant, important. That's not even a way to describe it. It's a part of our DNA. It's a part of our bloodstream. So to not to have this in this country or in the whole world, it's like saying we don't exist. It's like saying I don't exist. It's like saying I don't want to exist. I don't want to exist without doing what it is that I do that's important about the culture and the people that I represent, and that this is who I am. So I think that with the George Floyd situation, to me, is like living theater being played out on television. You look at the testimonies for all the witnesses and what they're doing. It's absolutely fascinating. You can't even write theater. It's theater of the absurd. It's Black theater. It's American theater. It's all of these different elements and things that are involved. So to answer your question is, if you take it out of who we are and say that it doesn't exist, then all of us may as well just go and just commit our own suicide.
I think absolutely, absolutely, and I think that there is something about a place that specifically nurtures um, people of color, where you're surrounded by a certain culture environment, and there's no limit to what that means because we are so deeply complex and layered, that I think certain things come out of that housing and nurturing that you may not be able to achieve in other places. I think sometimes writers, for instance, start overthinking their audience and they start writing for a specific audience, then who are you thinking of, depending on what institution you're in and what that institution is telling you people want to hear. That affects the product itself, I think.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Right now, too, uh, because it was funding was given to specifically race-specific theaters, specifically African American theaters, through, say, the 70s. And then with a certain integration, that money went to white institutions and Black institutions, other institutions of color fell away or struggled. Some, like yourself, continued to fight on and fight that fight for a place, for a legacy, continuing very needed outreach in our communities. It was then up until now, and I'm really finding it really interesting, Curtis. Now there seems to be a reversal, and there's a kind of a renaissance in terms of if you want to say BIPOC, and then specifically Black theater, Black voices, Black programming. It seems to be flourishing right now, and people are giving money now to those institutions. Why is that right now?
I think, to be honest, I really do think there are two reasons. I think COVID-19 has had a lot to do with it. And I think that because we were all forced as human beings to be in jail in our own homes. And so we didn't have much of a choice other than to go to a store with a mask on. People couldn't see us. And the only thing that we could see just the eyes of individuals, and then go back home. And then we were forced to see what was happening on television. And so our eyes were glued to COVID-19 survival. I think the other piece of it is, while we were there at the COVID-19, we had an opportunity to see something that had already been seen anyway in America. The need of a person who doesn't look like me being literally murdered before our own eyes. And something about that really created a kind of a really deep, profound humanity in people who were non-African Americans. It was that humanity piece in it. I think those are two things. And so as a result, I think a lot of it has to do with guilt. I think a lot of it has to do with recognition of the possibility of accepting something that has been done to a particular people who worked tirelessly to build a country or an America like this. And so as a result of that, you have that resurgence of all of these things that are coming, the money. I think one thing that's really fascinating to the question that you mentioned is that there's a theater in New York called the Billie Holiday Theater. It's a Black theater, and the woman who's director, yes, put together a project called The Black Seed. And the whole idea of that project is to go to the major foundations in America and ask these individuals to give money specifically to Black theaters, to hire Black actors, directors, technicians, to build a Black audience so that we will be able to sustain the audience with the finances and present new works that people may or may not have seen before. And so what she did is she got $5 million from the Mellon Foundation.
Yes.
And what I love about what she did is that she took that money and distributed that money among 100 plus predominantly, well, not predominantly, African American theaters in these United States. Yes. And that is something that has never been done in this country. And she is to be applauded for that.
Yes.
I get teary-eyed almost when I think about the kind of vision and the foresight and her not being selfish to do that, because she's thinking about Black theater in America and where we place and what we do, and how at one point in the 1960s, when white directors, producers, et cetera, would go to the Black theater and get these great artists, and they become A-listers, if you will, in Hollywood or on Broadway. And so now we see a resurgence of that coming again. And I just pray and hope that those of us who are running these institutions like us, is that we really take the advantage and get from behind our curtains, our desk, and get out in the community. And nurture and cultivate these communities in a way that we can be able to survive and sustain our institution for the long haul.
Yes, and that's exactly what you've done. You have longevity and hard-earned longevity, and you are far-reaching in terms of programming, in terms of community. Do you think that is foundationally your saving grace?
I think it is. I think it is definitely that. I think it's because I'm not done anything different than the way I have been raised by my parents and trained by the great. You know, I talk about all of my mentors. I don't want to say this to drop names, but I'm grateful to Margaret Walker. I'm grateful to Thomas Stewart, Melina Dow. I'm grateful to Oscar Davis, Ruby D, Esther Rose, B. Richard, William Marshall, Robert Hooks. I'm grateful to these people because they saw this little Black kid from the South with this little long hair who was just inevitable. What they always say, they saw this it thing in this individual. And I remember Esther used to say to me all the time, make sure that what you have, you pass it on to the young so that they don't end up having to plow the same fields. So I think that foundation that they gave me is a foundation that I've used to build the institution with, and what I am working on ferociously to pass on to other individuals in a non-selfish way. Because I'm not going to be here forever. I don't want to be in a casket. I don't want to be in a wheelchair. I don't want to be in a nursing home. And then take everything that I've learned the hard way to the grave with me and not pass it on to someone else so they can be able to perpetuate that. Not to say this in terms of foundation. Somebody like Mary McLeod Bethune can build a school with young girls selling sweet potato pies for 25 cents. And the university is 100-some years old. Why is it that we can't use the same kind of foundation that those individuals created in this day and time when we have more resources that are available to us? We know we're smart, we're focused, we're intelligent, we're articulate, we're winning all kind of awards. You know, we have money, we have all of these things. That's why I love what Tyler Perry has done with his project. He's given us a platform and a venue to be able to do something, the kind of things that we've always wanted to do, when other people may say, no, we're not interested in that kind of work. You know,
it is that entrepreneurship.
Yes, absolutely.
That we must have in the vein of Tyler Perry, in the vein of Oscar Micheaux. It is grassroots.
That's right. So I think those things are important, you know.
Right now, in this crisis, COVID-19, it is also paralyzing theaters across the country on every level. Theaters have shut down. How are you making it? How do you continue?
Well, Now, let me just say that it is a challenge. I'm not going to say it's a struggle because that can be perceived as negative, perhaps, depending on who's viewing it. But a struggle is a struggle. So, in terms of struggling for money, I don't see anything any different now that I'm dealing with pre-COVID-19. What COVID-19 has done for me is, as a director now, it has challenged me to be creative within the confines of what I have to deal with, what I have to work with, you know. So 44 years in existence. So 44 years ago, we didn't have a venue, you know. We worked in churches, in recreation centers. 44 years later, we're in the heart of downtown Dallas, Texas, 250,000 square foot venue. And so why should I sit and complain because of certain things that we don't have when we do have a venue, two venues actually, performance venue. So what you do, Curtis, is that don't sit and complain. Just create within the confines of what you're able to do based upon science and medicine, and do what you do. So we've actually been doing programs and projects since we left here in March of last year, and we came back to the venue in person in June. And what we did is we did virtual programs. We created there's a project that we created called Shelter in Place. We did it on Sunday evenings at 5 o'clock every Sunday evening. It was a 45-minute to 1 hour show. And I will tell you, we pulled it from our archives, which is located on the University of North Texas campus. And we created 13 programs from the archives. You were part of that. On a Sunday evening, and I will tell you, we raised about $30,000 just in donations, not just from the United States. They came from all over the world, South Africa, Australia. And what we did is that we said, well, we know people love Black artists in Australia, in South Africa, in London. And so what we did, we bought some inexpensive Facebook, Instagram advertisements and marketed those countries and told them when we were doing, when we were going to do air the program. We found out the exact time that it would air in those countries, and we marketed those individuals. That's how we made that $30-some thousand during that time period. So to answer your question, Regina, we just didn't sit and just say, oh, let me hold my hand, twiddle my thumb, oh, woe is me, saying that, listen, we got much of a choice. So when Black people in the South, they would go out and kill the hogs and milk the cow and make the butter and do all that because they didn't have another choice. Right. So for me,
there's always been challenges. There's always been a struggle, and we have always found a way to move.
That's right.
Whether now or before or sometime in the future. Yes.
So my pastor always say, he's passed away, he said, when you have make lemonade out of it. My great grandmother used to say, don't throw them biscuits away. She would take those biscuits, put them in water, soak them, put eggs, sugar, nutmeg, and flavor in it, and make biscuit pudding. And now you can't even, biscuit pudding costs what, $5, $6, $7. They put a little bourbon in it and raisin, all this stuff in it. But biscuit pudding came off of my great grandmother's table because it was a way of survival. But now it's I'll get some biscuit pudding, and put just a little bourbon sauce on it and raisin. I mean, hey. So I feel great to be who I am, and do it and be who I am without apologies. Without apologies or shame.
Shame. Yes, absolutely. What are you planning for this next leg? We are talking about, again, with COVID, the different stipulations, people having the talk about opening doors again in this next season. What are you foreseeing in this next season?
I see in terms of programming, a lot, but I would say 50% of the program, we're going to use a lot of young, brilliant, brilliant artists. We call those Black Seeds. We have a program that we're doing with 6 African American college university theater departments. Jackson State University, Alabama State, North Carolina Central, Bethune-Cookman, Texas Southern, and Grambling State Universities. And we're getting 6 individual young playwrights from their department to produce one of their one-act plays for the first year, which is coming up. And then the second year, we're doing 6 of those individual students from those college universities to do a full-length play. The initial thing we're going to do is do it as a professional stage reading. We want you to work with us on that project. And I think the other piece of it is,
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
I want you to work with us on that project.
Oh, would love to. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you. Would love to.
and
Let's,
I'll be in touch with you about that. I
okay.
think the other piece of it is for those of us who run in institutions, the physical locations.
Yes.
What we're looking at is trying to figure out a way to get someone to help us to raise money to put in the cameras into both of our venues so that we can do a combination of two. We'll have live performances in person. And then for those individuals who still may be apprehensive about coming out in a period of time, but we will also sell those as virtual performances.
Hmm.
We know that it works. A lot of these
Fantastic. Yes.
are privileged to have the money. They have already put in robotic cameras into the venues, and they're already working out the kinks. So that means that an institution like the Black Academy, we are already behind because we're just trying to find $30,000 to install robotic cameras in so that when we move toward next year, thinking that the pandemic will kind of be behind us, that we'll be able to have a way to to generate funding on both ways, in person and virtual. Because I would say that this country, in terms of entertainment, is never ever going to be the same again. Because people can get entertainment that's going to be less expensive because you can do virtual stuff. That's been the creative side of it. Some people just say, well, I can go out if I want to, but I don't want to go out. I want to lay on my couch, eat popcorn. I don't want to change clothes, but I want to go to the Black Academy. So I want to see that show. We did the King concert. We've done Emmys for it.
Yes.
The King concert this past year, we did it. The Morrison Symphony Hall has 13 robotic cameras. And we did pretty well. We sold a little over 500 tickets for that particular show, which is the first time that we've ever sold that many tickets, And it really worked out very, very well. And then we were able to lower our costs.
That concert is always very well attended. So
Yes,
to do even better this year is a great testament. Yes.
So I think that's what we have to do. I think that we have to find the money to be able to work on 2 levels, the in-person and then the virtual. Because that's not something that we want to move because we know it works and it works very well. And it helps with our bottom line financially.
Yes, it is an expanding of your base of your audience through virtual performances. I think it's a great tool that will continue even as doors are opening.
Yeah.
Always, always.
Regina, I'm so excited about the possibilities.
Yes.
And someone said to me the other day, I was on an interview, they said, do you see money as a factor for not being able to do what you want to do? I said, no, because if money is going to be a factor for not getting the work done, we're never going to do anything. We have to find a way to do it.
Always.
And we will do it.
Yes.
I'm excited. I'm just terribly excited. As you can tell, right?
Yes. I think there's so much that can happen in this next year. We've learned, we've been pushed into technology as a whole, as in terms of theater and what uh, that means in terms of the definition of theater. And I say we've all been challenged by it, some pushed, and some willingly accept and adapt and grow. And that's what you've been doing. I applaud you from beginning when I entered and going around to different centers and traveling the country. And I remember in that first trip, and a trip, was it to Mississippi? I know it was
In
through
Mississippi, yes.
afterwards.
At Ole Miss, as a matter of fact.
Yes. And heading back home, you stopped the bus and you ordered us to get out. And there's this field, and you told us to pick some cotton. And I picked some cotton for the very first time in my life. I took
You
that.
still have the cotton?
I have it somewhere up in the attic or somewhere. Yes, that was a very special moment. I thank you for that. It let me know what my ancestors were doing.
Yeah. Yes.
And still with that, dreaming and passing those dreams on to the next generation. And that's what you're doing. That's what you do. And I thank you for that, Mr.
Well,
Curtis.
I'm so grateful you are part of my life and my world, and a part of this institution at the very beginning. Quite frankly, I didn't know what I was doing. I was feeling my way, and I was feeling my way based on my own experiences with what I had been taught by my parents and my mentors. And grateful to people like Erica Badu, who came out of this theater, who consistently support the work that we do at this institution. I mean, to see her also as a young girl, she was younger than you were when you came. She was about 7 or 8. And then all of the people who have been through these doors, a recording with Eartha Kitt, and then a recording with Jasmine Guy and Ruben Studdard and all these people. Then to take young people to do, it was a funny story, you're talking about what I made y'all do to pick the cotton. I took a group of 8 young students to New York about 3 years ago. And so one of the things that I told them, I said, we're gonna go in the middle of Times Square. When I report to you, you best start singing. And if more than 15 or 20 people stop and pay attention to you in the middle of Times Square, then you got something. So we went to New York, we did a Broadway showcase. And so it was really nice. They were really excited to see all these lights. And so there were 8 young people, and they are unbelievably brilliant. I pointed to them, and they just started singing. There must have been 300 or 400 people that started gathering around, and they just started throwing money at them, And they knew they had a New York audience then. And I will tell you, those 8 young people, every last one of them, among many others, they all are doing something in showbiz, and they are doing incredibly well. They've gone on to college. They have degrees. Most of them have graduated. The other 3 that not graduated, they will be graduating next year. And they just have to walk with time, like you, Regina, like Erica. They just have to walk in time to make that place of what they're doing, teaching our people in my community how to walk in a room and know that you're the king and the queen, that you're somebody. You're not the pimp or the prostitute on the corner. I'm not calling nobody. But when you walk with pride and dignity because you have come from it. And some people just, we always say this, but this is what I tell them. When you walk in these doors, you walk with your head up. You're not bound to anybody. Some mind who told me, I always never forget this. It was about 20 years ago. I said, Doc, I said, would you take a picture with me? She says, absolutely, Mr. King. And so she was sitting. So I was kind of bending down, to take the picture with her. She said, sir, stand up. She said, don't you ever stoop to take a picture with anybody. She said, you're a bright, brilliant young man. She said, so stand up. And I stood up by her and took the picture with her. And that was something that I always learned. You share those golden nuggets like that with other young people. When you walk in the door, you walk in the door with your head high, because you walking not just on the shoulders, you walking on the bodies, people who have bled, people who died, people who worked their hands in the soil. you walking on those individuals' bodies. And every time you walk in, they're lifting you up. To see all of these young people in our summer program, 400 some young people coming from all across the city, some parts of the country, walking the doors. And one of the things I tell them is that if you're sitting next to somebody that you already know, I make them move. I said, because your life isn't like that. You sit with somebody that you don't know, because your life is going to continue to expand. And so to watch all of these brilliant minds invest in their lives and things like that, and do things like what you are doing, like our conversation today. This conversation is a very important conversation to me, because I'm looking at somebody who was a 17-year-old young woman that came in the theater and trusted somebody, didn't know what the hell he was doing, but just trying to fish it. And so
I was trying to figure, because again, you never change. But I was 17. You were in your 20s.
Yes, that's right.
You were in your 20s when
right.
you started this company. I won't say how old.
I won't say how old, right?
But and it's a remarkable journey. And I think it's just so stellar that you continue to plant these seeds. You continue to nurture. You continue to do all of this outreach that surrounds you today. You lift people up, and others return to lift you up. And so it continues, and so it will continue, and so it goes. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Curtis.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for making this time.